Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Zowe Sprint System demo. Today we're going to be demoing the 1.23 version. So the first squad up will be the API mediation layer, and I have David who's going to present. Go ahead, David.
Hello, Nick. Thank you. Let me share my screen. You should see it now.
Yes.
Thank you. So what I'm going to present today is our load balancing effort developed in PI2. I'm going to present it in its entirety with a little bit of a preview. I will mention that at the end. So we have created a deterministic load balancing capability in API mediation layer. Let me show you the two main features that we have. First of them is let's say header-based load balancing, and the other main feature is the authentication-based load balancing. There has been some changes in the header-based load balancing, so I'm going to show it to you again. Let me show you the environment which I've prepared for you. I'm running a cluster of services with two gateways on hostname gateway service 2 and gateway service. I'm running two instances of discoverable client, again on discoverable client 2, and I'm running two instances of header client, which is running on different hosts, discoverable client and discoverable client 2. So these are the service IDs of the services. How I have configured the environment, let me move it. I hope you can see this. There is a couple of things that have to be done. Is it readable? This small?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, perfect. I have configured the gateway with this value, API/ML routing instance ID header, which will output a special header that will show us which instance of the service has been routed. So this is for us to see what's happening. And also this is for clients, so they can enable this and understand where they have been routed. I have also enabled this feature, API/ML load balancer distribute. This is off by default. What this means is that the authentication-based load balancing will get distributed across the gateways with the help of caching service. This distributed authentication load balancing, I'm not sure if it made it into 1.23 release, but it's done. So I'm going to demo it anyway. So you can expect it, I think, in the following release. But otherwise, for the single instance of gateway, I believe authentication-based load balancing is part of 1.23 release. I'm running these two clients. One of them is discoverable client, and one of them is the header client. Let me switch to a different view. Let's try a REST client now. I'm gonna call Eureka Apps just to show you. This is the header client that I'm calling. There is a section of the metadata. Each service can now specify which type of load balancer it wants. There is this key, API/ML LB type, and you see that this header client service configures the header request type. And there is the other one, which is called discoverable client. So if I call it, I get another discoverable client here. And if I search for the key APIML LB type, if I can find it. Yeah, there we go. This client, this service wants to use the authentication load balancer. So I'm going to demonstrate both of them. So first, let me start with the header type. So how does that work? I'm gonna find the request here to header client. Yeah, and I'm gonna call it. So I'm calling this one with the header client greeting on one instance of gateway. I'm getting 404 here. Not entirely sure why, but let's take a look at the headers. You see now, I get this header output by the gateway X instance ID, and that tells me which instance has been routed. And if I try this a couple of times, you see that this one goes to discoverable client 2, which is probably broken because it's giving me 404, but it's routing to that. See, this X instance ID is changing. I, as a client, have an opportunity now, since this API requested the header load balancer type. I have a capability to provide this header on the request and ask for this specific instance ID. So if I paste it in here, you'll see that now I'm just being routed to that client and nothing else. If I change it, if I put the other one here, you see I'm going to the, oh, maybe I messed up. Okay, this is the discoverable client. Let's try get routed to the other one. I'll just copy this value. Okay, now again, you see that I'm going to the other one. I probably mistyped the value there. So what can client do with this? Basically, a client can get routed for the first time here, and then he can choose to take the instance and then provide this header on all subsequent requests. And this way he can achieve sticky session functionality and basically, or select a specific instance. If he knows what instances are being onboarded, he can obtain this information from Discovery Service, for instance, right? So he can choose which instance to go to, and he can also choose to remove this this header from the request and just be routed in a round robin fashion. If he provides some gibberish there, then he will get 503 service unavailable, and we will get a message that there's no client or there's no server of this name that the load balancer knows about. So that's the first feature. The second feature is the authentication-based load balancing. So I'm gonna call the discoverable client now. Let's again take a look at the headers. So I'm going to the discoverable client 2, and if you see again, I'm going to discoverable client 1, and I'm generally routed in a round robin fashion. And if I also demonstrate the distribution. If I call the other gateway, I have another gateway here. And if I call it, again, you see I'm being round robined around. Next, I'll perform, you see I have no cookie here. If I perform authentication now, I'll authenticate as user 1. I get a cookie now. Now, there is one thing that if you're gonna try this, you should take care about, which is the domain. If you're trying this from a client, it might trip you up if you have different host names. Make sure that you're calling with the right cookie domain. Otherwise, the cookie will not get sent to the other one. I'm using Docker and I'm using some special setup with the host names, so I'm okay in this case, but it can trip you up. So now I have this cookie. So let's try to call again against the first gateway and see what happens. okay, now I'm going to discoverable client, and the gateway now remembers. And every time I go there, you see, I just go to the discoverable client, because gateway knows that I, as a user one, want to be routed to this instance. And the distribution works like this. If I call against the other gateway, you see I'm going to the same host or same service ID, regardless, right? So if I delete the cookie and just start calling normally, you see I'm being again routed in a round robin fashion. Now I'll get another cookie. This is a different one, right? Because I've performed another login, I got another cookie. And again, if I call the gateway, I am again going to the same client as before. So it's cookie agnostic. It's really based on the authenticated user as such. And the same works on the other gateway as well. So it sticks now to this. There is a session expiration which can be configured by the client. We have documented it in the doc site about what key has to be there. The service can say how many hours it wants the session to last. The default is 8 hours. After that, the preference gets removed, and again the cycle happens. So you get routed to some instance, then the session is stored, and then you get routed around. Okay, maybe one more thing regarding resiliency of this distribution. The records are stored in the caching service. There are, let's say, two caches. There is a local cache in the gateway and a remote cache in the caching service. Both of those caches are populated. If the caching service dies, or if it is not there, then basically the authentication-based load balancing will still work, although it will not be distributed. And if the caching service then comes back online, then either based on the state of the information in the caching service, either it will be overwritten or it will be used if it's still valid in the caching service. But it has some resiliency in regards to presence of caching service. But as I said, by default in Zowe installation, the distribution between gateway services is turned off, because we anticipate most of the installation in non-HA mode. But for HA, this can be definitely configured and enabled. Are there any questions?
Yeah, just a small question about the customizable session length. I was curious, you said, it's a default of 8 hours and it can be, I suppose, less, but is there an issue with when ZOSMF is used? Because I thought ZOSMF was not customizable, so could you go over 8 hours?
You can configure that, but at the moment we don't configure ZOSMF with this load balancing. I mean, it has to come from the service metadata to be enabled at all, and we don't do this for ZOSMF. Okay,
but should those numbers be related, or can they just be any different numbers that you want?
It is arbitrary. It's up to you how many hours you configure.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right.
So David, this is excellent. Thank you very much for doing this. I know from IBM's point of view, we have something called the Remote System Server and the Remote System Explorer. And the issue that we had was if we spin up perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 instances, when a user comes in, we actually create a Java authenticated thread allocated to that user ID. And we need to make sure that subsequent requests do get routed to the same one, just to control memory and things like that, and throttle performance. So this is perfect. Thank you very much to the squad for doing this. Well done.
Yes, you are welcome.
Yeah.
You, I think, are the main customer of this functionality.
Okay.
So you're welcome to try it out and give us any feedback. And if anyone wants to give it a spin, please, so we will be happy for any feedback. Or if you have any other use cases apart from these which we have developed, feel free to ask us in the Slack channels or create issues against our repository. We will be happy to look at that.
Yeah, thanks, David. And
Yeah, I second that. I think the Web UI squad will find a use for this too.
Excellent.
Yeah, David, I don't see anybody from Sagas on the call, but I know Madeline was keen on this as well, because again, anybody who has a Java server beneath the API mediation layer is probably going to want to create a thread, an authenticated thread on behalf of that, the user ID that comes in. And it's better if they can keep that thread around and reassign that thread. It's just more optimal. So if you have like 5 requests all coming in quick succession and they all go to 5 instances, I don't know about how Node works, but this will help all of the Java servers where you're dealing with authenticated threads. So maybe we should reach out to Madeline or for somebody from Sagas, because they have the similar pattern, which is that they have a Tomcat server. Thank you. Thanks, squad.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll move on then. The next squad is the CLI squad. I think that's Fernando who's going to present.
That's right. Yep. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Awesome. We're a little bit behind, so I'm not going to try to rush through this, but I have some really exciting news to share with you guys. First, that headline. The CLI vNext is now available on Zowe.org. For the 1.23 of the Zowe release, we were able to bundle a few features containing a little bit of a preview for the vNext that's coming up here, hopefully next year. And first, let's start by grabbing that vNext release. You will want to go into the Zowe.org, click on the download link, and from there, you can scroll down to the Zowe technical preview, where you will find the Zowe Docker build, the V2 LTS preview, as well as the Zowe Explorer. In the Zowe V2 LTS preview, you're going to see 2 sections, one for the Zowe CLI and another one for the client SDK. Right now, the only client SDK we are putting up here for validation is the Node.js one. And as well, there's information about those API references for the client, for the SDK client, as well as some documentation and some even design documents, right, on some of the early access features that we're providing today, or we're going to be demoing today for the vNext CLI core. So as any other package, as soon as you click here, you are going to be prompted, you're going to be presented with the end user's license agreement for Zowe. You agree, you disagree, right? But once you agree on this, right, you are going to get redirected. The download's going to start, and you're going to get redirected to the installing Zowe CLI page, where you can find more information in terms of how to install the Zowe CLI from a local package and whatnot, right? So in the interest of time, I've already downloaded the package. I've unzipped it, installed it, just to save ourselves a little bit of time. But before getting into this, right, first I really want to compare what we got from the previous package, from the LTS, the V1 LTS package that was released on Zowe 1.23. It's on my left-hand side here, and the vNext package. And you notice there is a difference here that we do not have the secure credential store package bundled up together with the vNext version. And this brings us to our first feature that we want to highlight, and that's secure by default. We were able to integrate that secure credential store plugin with the CLI all bundled together. So now that the CLI comes with sort of security per se, right? And you don't have to go through the hurdles of installing a separate plugin just from the core package. Another main feature that we want to highlight is the team configuration. So now I can go into the fun stuff. Again, I'm going to be using the same version. I just moved to another terminal because I'm going to be using a couple of demo items here. But there's one thing that I want everyone to keep in mind while I'm going through this. This team configuration files, this files are only need to be set up once, and they can be shared throughout team members, even organizations, so that they can make use of and just get started more easily, or their users can get started more easily with all the connection information already specified for them. Anything organization-wise, like API mediation layer configuration, all that good stuff is already set up for them. But for this demonstration, we're going to go through and create the Zowe config and all the other items from scratch. And to do that, we can do a Zowe config init. And what that's going to do is going to prompt me for username and password. I'm just going to provide that here. All right. And to pour that in a couple of files, it's going to create a couple of files for me that were there before. It's going to create a schema, which is basically we're not going to go into that into too much detail. That's just basically provided intelligence for whenever we're editing this awesome file that the command created for us. So I'm going to go ahead and open this workspace in VS Code. We're going to see the same two files. I also have this executable, which I'm going to be using later for another cool feature that we're going to demonstrate here. But as you can see here, there is no username, even though I provided them on the CLI. There is no real username or credential information in this file, which means these can be added to source control, say GitHub, and easily shared with the team members. Here I have information like, I can put my host, I can do the ports for each individual service that I'm connected through on this L part. But for this demonstration, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment out this and I'm going to update this port, because I know I'm going to be talking to this port specifically on the host. And I'm going to see that the CLI is going to prompt me for any kind of information that I'm lacking, right, for me to be able to run a command. The first command that I can comes to mind, right? So jobs list job. I'm going to do response format header just to have some nice input. And we will see here that it's going to prompt me for the host name of the service, say that I was on a demo like I am today, right? I don't maybe want to share the host name for some reason, for security reasons, right? So I can cancel out of that and still just want to showcase that we can still use the prompt start mechanisms that we were able to use before. So I'm going to execute that, and it's going to prompt me for the host to store it. Not to store it, but to provide it, to communicate to it, same as before. So I'm going to provide it here. And a port. Let me, not sure why the port didn't take effect. I'm just going to provide it here. Okay, so we see that my session, the just regular output from the Zowe jobs list jobs, but then I had to input my host every time, right? So say that I didn't want to do that, I can go in here and specify that the host into my list of secure properties. This is a feature that we're not able to do in the V1 LTS versions of the profiles, right? Now we can pretty much secure any property that we see necessary, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And once I add or update any secure properties, I can run a Zowe config secure command. And it's just going to go ahead and prompt me for all the secure properties it knows about. And it's going to store them securely with secure credential store that was already bundled together, as we saw before with CLI. So I'm going to provide that. It's also going to ask me for username. I don't have to provide that, so I'm just going to hit enter. This is just all the same, right? It's going to keep that information. So now, same command as before. Now I don't have to provide the host, right? So it should take a little bit of time here. I'm not sure why it's going to port 443, but I'm going to do port. Since I know that's the direct service connection to the port. And again, I did not have to provide the host, and it was stored securely. Again, not anywhere on this file, right? Another cool feature that I really want to go to is, first, I wanted to remind people that they can ask questions in the middle. Just feel free to interrupt me. I really want to make this as interactive as possible, right? So if anything comes to mind, please stop me and ask questions. So again, this was all direct to service connections. Say that I wanted to configure, make things a little easier for myself, and I want to do connect to the API mediation layer. I could go in here, provide the base path and all that, thanks to the IntelliSense that the schema file provides, right? I can do that, but again, this is error prone. So we kind of don't want to do that by hand. We want to let the API ML do it for us. So we have introduced, this is the next feature that we wanted to highlight. We have introduced a auto init command. For this purpose, for this demonstration, I'm just going to delete, I'm going to kind of start from a clean slate. I'm going to delete this file. Sure, I want to delete it. And we'll see here, so we config JSON. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a so we config auto init. And I'm going to provide the host because it doesn't have any idea that I store that securely or anything with the from start. And I'm also going to provide my user. For the host. One second. Might have made a typo. The port and my password, of course. And you see it's going to be blanked out. It's just going to print stars as I'm typing it, right? Because we don't want to share that information. But again, what this command did, it created a Zowe config JSON file for us, and it contains different services, different profiles for me that it was able to gather from the Zowe API ML conformance services available on the API ML instance that I was connected to, and based on any plugins that I may have installed that are also need to conform it as well, right? So now I can do the same command as before. Zowe jobs. I don't need to specify the port again. That was just kind of weird that it wasn't taken the port before, and boom. Just one command from scratch. We got ourselves going with API ML and not even had to think about any configuration details like what's the service ID? Should I worry about base path? I not even have to go to the API ML catalog to find those kinds of information. Last but certainly not least, there is a cool feature that we want to demonstrate here, and that's Zowe daemon. The daemon you may have. Ideally, right, the CLI will perform fast on Node.js, right? As you can see here, just doing a version command, and so it can take a couple of seconds, right? So you want to avoid that. We want to make a performance increase here, and for that we have the daemon. For the daemon, you will have to go get it either from the repository. There is this native client release, and we bundle up together a few binaries depending on the operating system, right? In my case, I've already downloaded and unzipped the executable, which was the file that we saw before, the zoex.exe. And the way we will start communicating with the daemon, right? When we'll start the service, I'm just going to run it in a separate a separate terminal. I'm just gonna spawn a new terminal, start the daemon with the Zowe -- daemon flag, and it says gonna be bound to port 4000. That's also configurable. There's again more information on here. If you click on the early access features, there's certainly design documents on how to go about configuring the daemon and all that. But for the demo, right, this is already running in the background. And any requests that I make, I'm just going to compare side by side. Doing a help on Zowe on Node.js takes a little bit of time, right? But doing it on Zowe X, which is the binary, the executable that we downloaded, it certainly is much faster. Like I can even spam that, right? And everything is just coming through this server, right? It also understands, it also knows about the Zowe config properties, and we've been enhancing that and making a lot of fixes to it to make the experience a little more seamless. And for example, I can do all my regular commands, jobs list jobs. Same deal, right? I do not have to wait too much for the CLI. My computer is now like acting quite fast today, but see how that took a little bit of time, right? That was instant. Boom, right? Pretty cool features. So to wrap it up, I really want to recap some of the things we went through. We went over how to get the bundle from Zowe, right? We also went through comparing the packages V1 LTS and V2 preview, which we saw the V2 preview didn't have the secure credentials stored as a separate package. We also showcased the team configuration file, right, and how easily people can get started by being given a Zowe config JSON file, right? They could even start running commands after a couple of seconds instead of having to know all the information that they're required to know, right? They can leave that to the architects or whatnot. And the last thing we saw was the daemon mode. Pretty fast, really like it. So if you have any questions, any comments, if you are looking for more information on any of these topics, feel free to reach out to the CLI squad, and I'll be happy to take questions now.
Hey, Fernando, I have a quick question. Awesome job. Well done, everybody who worked on this. You touched on, I loved it when you connected to the API mediation layer on the 6800 port or whatever the port was.
Yep.
And you then didn't have to specify any ZOSMF stuff. That was a class act. You mentioned conformant plugins, and I wondered, I don't know if you could talk about that more. So let's assume if we take something like CA Endeavor or Phoenix eJazz or IBM Remote System Explorer, for example, they all have Zowe conformant CLI plugins. Does that mean if you happen to have that CLI plugin loaded and that happens to be registered to the mediation layer, that somehow you're able to match the service ID of that on the mediation layer to the CLI extension and somehow bind together the profile?
That
Or
is
did I
correct.
misread that?
No, that's really correct. Let me.
Okay, because I was curious because I on the conformance program, it got me thinking, how do you know what the service ID is? Because I didn't know that the CLI, anyway, go ahead and show it. You were just about to show that, yeah.
Sure thing. Give me 1 second.
While Fernando's pulling that up, and in our V2 conformance criteria that we're drafting, we're going to require folks who have conformant, who have plugins that access conformant APIs to add the service ID property in their metadata. And that's what basically allows us to match.
Yeah, otherwise,
yeah,
right, because you need that information. Or we actually have to hard code it or make a leap of faith. Thanks, Mike. Yeah. Okay,
that's
cool.
right. The other criteria beyond service ID through API mediation layer is you need to be SSO conformant. And what that enables us to do is when we run that command, we're already signed into the API mediation layer, and you can just start running commands to any service. So that's the other small requirement, is your API has to be engaged in SSO through API mediation layer, and you have to have a service ID. Then you just need to make a small update to the metadata on the CLI side to match that service ID up.
Nice. And presumably after David and the API squad just showed their sticky session, presumably you now, did it make you think, well, now we need to add in something like an argument like -- sticky or something like that? Or, yeah, it's just made more work for you. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, no, certainly. Thanks, Mike, for jumping in. Because I was trying to find some configurations, some properties like that, but basically they will just appear here as they're found in the API mediation layer, right? The services, the SSO conform, SSO enable API/ML conforming plugins or services, right? And
You don't have to demo live unless, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to trip you up. I had one quick question. You chose not to echo the host name. So you echoed the port, you echoed the user ID, you masked the password. I wondered on input why you didn't echo the host name. Like if I make a connection on SSH or SFTP or something, I'm used to having the host echoed to me because I saw you actually made a mistake and you had to correct it. It's just presumably you, anyway, I just wondered what the design point was as to why you didn't echo the host name. When you
yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say it's generally echoed. He just didn't want to share the host name with everyone.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Thank
Thank
at the
you.
moment. Yep.
Thanks
It's echoed by default. Yep.
Cheers. Okay.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you, Fernando.
Sure thing.
Next squad is the Explorer squad, and I think Billie Jean will get us started there. I think you're on mute.
Hello. Yep, I was trying to get on mute. Can you hear me and see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
It should be the VS Code with the Zowe Explorer tab open.
Yes.
With the version 1.17, we did release some new capabilities. One of them is the support for the multiple VS Code windows. With this support, if you go into your settings and into extensions for the Zowe Explorer settings, you'll see down near the bottom, we have a new setting here. It is by default check true to ensure the deletion of your temporary folder, but you can deactivate that if you want to have that multiple window support. So beforehand, before 1.17, you know, if you opened a file on ZOS through Zowe Explorer, and then you went over to new window, as soon as you open a new window, you would get the deleted next to your file. Now, even with this default check, that won't happen as you open new windows, but when you close a window and the deactivate is called, then you'll see the deleted. But if you uncheck this and allow, you know, the VS Code to not delete your temporary folder on deactivate, then, you know, you can have these multiple windows open and work across, you know, different workspaces or different LPARs. And so let's open one back up. And now you go to new window, we can say open a USS file or something. So let's do that. And then when we close this and you're done with that window, this one is not deleted anymore. We do state that sometimes your files can get outdated with this because we do check the cache. So with that, you can either do your pull from Mainframe and get your updated version before you start editing if you believe it may be outdated or anything. Or you still have that little pop-up that'll show up that you've seen in the past, kind of like a Git lens comparing to two differences between your host file and your local file. So you can make changes that way as well. Any questions on this new feature? All right, I will stop sharing and Where's my? Stop share. There we go. Thank you. And I'll hand it over back to you, Nick.
All right, so the next person is Caitlin. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Yes, sir. Let me share my screen. Oh, which one do I want? This one, I guess. All right, so you should be able to see Zoe Explorer right now.
Yes.
I take silence as a yes as well. So just another quick little feature we added. Now you can delete more than one data set or member at a time. I'll go ahead and open these up. Oh, I guess that's about all. I just added a few data sets and members from our testing script. So you can hit your control or command key on the keyboard and then select everything that you want to delete. I don't want to delete this one, for instance, maybe, but I just want to delete one data set. Maybe from this one, I want to delete both members as well as the data set. And then you just hit delete on your keyboard, get a little confirmation message, and it gives you a little dialog down here. If you have any errors, it will pop up with an error for each element that had a problem. And when it's finished, you can take a look and see what was removed. And as you can see, there's nothing left here from the list. Yeah, that's about it. I guess another small thing to note, if you are deleting something from favorites, that's also possible. But at this time, it's not possible to delete from multiple different sessions at once. So if these are all going to list the same data sets because I have, the same login information, but I can't select something, for instance, from Ninaber and from test HTTPS at the same time and have it delete. You've got to only select from one. So there's some notes about this in our documentation. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, Caitlin, that's really good. What happens to the right mouse click pop-up menu when you have a sort of heterogeneous set of like a PDS and members? Does delete remain? So
You mean on the right click menu in the context?
Once you select more than one, yeah.
I believe it stays the same. You still have it. It's not quite accurate because, well, let's see. If I select the member and the data set, it's going to take it from what you select from, but it will still delete both.
So if you selected a PDS and a member, certain things aren't common to both of those?
What do you mean?
Well, you can't open it. So right now you have a PDS with no data sets in it. And if you right mouse click that menu, that will have delete, but that will have that will have create new member, for example.
Yes.
Right. And if you selected a PDS member, perhaps on one of the ones lower down that had content, that won't have create new member because that's a member. Yeah,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's all. It was just got me thinking, what's the intersection when you have that mixed list?
So right now, as far as I know, this is the only command that we have that supports multiple different selected items. If you select something else from the menu, so say I select 5 items and then right click, because multiple select is not supported for all of these other commands, it's just going to act on whichever one I have right clicked on, and it's going to ignore the rest.
Okay, cool. Right, thank you.
Maybe just throw in my 2 cents. Maybe if you multi-select, when you then right click, it reduces the context menu to only options that are applicable on multi-select, which would just be delete.
That might make more sense.
Approach. Yeah.
We should look into that.
Okay, but yeah, I love this feature. Nicely done.
Thank you. And I will take that as no more questions. So thanks, guys.
One more question. I'm sorry to do this. Does the same work on USS? Does it work on USS as well?
Well, I believe it's always worked on USS.
Oh, it has always worked. Okay, so
yes, this was just a data set thing.
Okay, and cancel job if you select multi-jobs and you want to cancel a purge.
We haven't added that yet.
I'm going to try it. Okay, sorry, I don't want to create more work for you. It's a great feature. Thank you.
No, it's good. If we can find the time, we'll definitely add it. Thank you.
All right, the next squad is the Web UI squad. First up would be Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
Sure. Let me share my screen here, and we can get started with talking about, I believe the first topic was OMVS service change. Okay. So in the Zowe documentation, we were looking at the list of permissions that you need to run the Zowe servers. And one of the permissions that we saw, and I guess I'll note that it's not actually on this table yet. We're currently kind of going through the documentation and finding the important stuff and putting them into tables. But one of the things that we saw is that the OMVS service, which is the service that, for example, when you open the editor, that it will go to the home folder of your user. It does that by contacting the OMVS service, which tells you about your OMVS region, such as what your home folder is, what your user ID is, and a few other things. This ability to do that is backed by the ESM, and in previous versions of Zowe, it turned out that this was being done in a way in which every single end user of Zowe would need that ESM permission. So we've since changed it in 123 so that only the user that is running the server itself needs that permission. So it should be much easier for people to actually set up the correct permissions for Zowe. Apart from that, the other things that I wanted to point out are just some things that we did for high availability. The first thing to note is in previous versions of Zowe, when the app server would register to the discovery servers, it would only register to one. It would look for the value of, I believe, Zowe Explorer host and combine that with a discovery port and would then just listen to that one discovery server. And this was a problem for high availability because if that discovery server went down for some reason, then the app server wouldn't be seen by the gateway over time. So instead, what we've done in 123 is that we are now looking for this parameter here, which is a list of all the discovery servers that exist. So this will allow us to contact more than one, and in the event that one is non-responsive, we can switch to the other one. So that's one part of the high availability puzzle. Another part is just things that we found didn't work so well in a high availability environment. One thing that people may have seen before is that we have a few different cookies. We don't really need anything but the API ML authentication token, but we do have other tokens that are sort of for backwards compatibility, or that we didn't, refactor our code enough or something. But we used to have this check on the server that we would check the referrer header of requests going to the app server, and we would reject when a refer didn't match what we thought was our host. But in high availability, there's more hosts involved, so actually checking that it's correct is more complicated. So we thought, now would be a good time to change that code. We don't need refer code if we use cookie attributes instead, because it accomplishes the same security task of making sure that you can't do cross-site request forgery. So in 123, you'll see there are a few different types of tokens here. There are tokens that are or aren't marked as HTTP only or secure, and then there are tokens that have this policy same site. And so what we did in 123 is that we actually marked the the cookies coming out of app server and ZSS as same site strict, which is the maximum amount of cross-site request forgery security you can do. This is supported by all browsers that we support. And if this property is missing, modern browsers will default to same site lax, which is partial security, because there's also one that's same site none. I would recommend that all servers in Zowe have same site strict cookies, unless we can find a reason why that wouldn't work for us, but I think that it will. So we made that change in the app server so that the refer logic is no longer used by default. It can still be enabled if needed, but this should solve some end user troubles with needing to set extra parameters manually. Now that the security feature is being done in an automatic fashion. Finally, there was one other thing in high availability, which was that the app server uses security plugins to figure out how to accomplish its security. For example, we have a plugin that delegates to the mediation layer. Well, since we have high availability now, we need to be careful about any state kept in the app server. So we actually added a new property to the security plugins in which they can state if they are high availability capable. And that could mean many things, but it's basically something that plugins must state because otherwise we would assume that they aren't. So what this meant, for example, is that in an out-of-the-box Zowe setup, we always had our SSO auth plugin, which talks to the mediation layer. And we always had a plugin called Trivial Auth, which wasn't actually used for anything, but it was there as sort of an example of how one might create a security plugin. Well, we set high availability capable equals true to the mediation layer plugin, but we did not set anything to the Trivial Auth plugin. So if it ever showed up in the logs prior, now it's not going to, because the app server in high availability setup will look at the plugin and say, this doesn't have the high availability flag, so I'm going to skip loading it. And if you requested a certain type of security plugin, like give me a security plugin that can communicate with SAF, if security plugins are skipped to the extent that you end up with no plugins that can handle type SAF, then the server would refuse to start and it would issue a warning stating that that was the reason. So at the end of the day, in 123, the behavior is still all automatic, where you're going to get a guaranteed compatible high availability environment as long as you have plugins that state that they are high availability capable. So since SSO auth is out of the box, this is just one more way that we're validating that everything's working together. And I think that's it for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Lenny.
Sure, that sounds good. Let me go ahead and share. All right. Hello, everyone. I'll keep it short and sweet here. The purpose of this demo is to showcase two quick quality of life improvements for the editor. The first one is we now save the mouse cursor state from tab to tab. So originally, whenever you would open a file or navigate to a different file that you had open via the tab, it would kind of refresh the editor state while you're viewing it. But now, for example, if you are, let's say I'm on line 15, I go to this file. As we can see, our mouse cursor is preserved, and that makes it very a lot better, you know, for those files that are hundreds of lines long, where we used to navigate from tab to tab, and then we would lose our place in the file. So that was fairly annoying. And the second one is the right-click download. Now, an important note is that both of these features are completed, but they are not in the current release. They will go into the next release. So I wanted to add that disclaimer. But the right-click download is also fairly straightforward. We have a file that we want to download off of USS. So we can right click here. I have a JPEG file in binary format. So I can right click this one and I can click on download. And that will now download my file. And there is our binary image. And this will also work with other file types. So for example, here we're browsing this note file, a rather text file that I have open here called bugs.txt. There it is. And we can right click download this one. And there it is on our local file system, in this case, my Windows machine. Yeah, pretty short and sweet here. Any questions on this? Alrighty, that sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Sean and Lenny. All right, so that's basically it for the topics that were supposed to be on the system demo. Any closing questions, comments? All right, then. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for those that presented, and we'll see you at the next system demo. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks, Nick.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Great work. Good release.
Thank
Cheers.
you.